Everyone, welcome to the TDR Trade Black podcast. Hope you all had a great weekend. Hope you had some good picks in the NFL yesterday. A lot of good games to bet on and definitely make some money. Last week, tough week to say the least, and we're continuing to see that here the first day back on the first trading day as the meltdown continues. And let's find out why it's still happening and what people can expect, obviously, as we progress into later this week. So let's welcome in our two co-hosts, lead financial writer of the Dales Report TDR, Benjamin A. Smith. How was your weekend? And did you survive the first trading day again?
Yeah, the weekend was good. NFL, San Francisco lost their third straight game. That was a little surprising, but weekend overall. And in terms of the markets, incredible price action. Downside MSOs continues, but we'll go into more detail about that.
Yeah, let's welcome in Anthony Verrill, millennial entrepreneur and TDR contributor. Good to see you. Hope you had a good weekend as well.
Nice weather. Weather was fantastic.
It was.
Went to the boat show Thursday, Friday, and then played golf on Saturday, and a bunch of good football.
Where's the boat show and where? Fort Lauderdale?
Fort Lauderdale, yeah. It's the largest in-water boat show in the world.
Are you thinking about buying a boat?
Eventually, yeah. We need the house first.
Yeah. And these cannabis stocks to move around, right?
Yeah, I'll be waiting all day. I'll be waiting all day if I'm counting on that.
All right, let's bring in our first segment, Into the Wire, as usual, which highlights basically all the biggest headlines in the industry. We'll get into some of the MSOs, advisory shares, ETF MSOs. It's testing all-time lows. But first, let's start with the state of Michigan, where Raymond Business Consulting, a consulting firm who represents cannabis companies with revenue ranging from $5 to $100 million, provided some detailed information on the state of the overall healthy industry in the state of Michigan. And there's some really telling information here. So first off, Anthony, maybe explain the significance of this report and why investors should really take note of this report.
Yeah, so it was a pretty interesting report. I found it was by Raymond Business Consulting. They're a professional services firm that do audits and advisory work across the board, broad spectrum. They do have a couple of cannabis clients. And this caught my eye into some of the internals from a capital markets perspective that are going on in the Michigan market. Had some interesting data points. And the reason why I brought it up is because it can kind of lean into what's going on at Sunstream with them picking up Skymint. With SNDL, the Gauge assets that are key and integral to the business of TerraSend, and then maybe some other MSOs going into the Michigan market in the downstream, as it does seem like the general health is on the mend.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just to get into the data, nearly half or 47% of the participants were vertically integrated, meaning they completely own seed to sale. In those businesses, those assets are ripe for the taking. If somebody wants to come in from an M&A perspective into the market. One thing that was daunting was nearly half said they plan to raise capital within the next 12 months.
What's that tell you?
Don't want to be doing that in a high rate environment. Don't want to be doing that really in general right now, especially if you're vertically integrated. If you can handle the debt service, okay. But on a go forward basis, these companies in that kind of market, if you're going to survive, you need to be free. You need to be producing free cash flow, especially if you're one of these craft, smaller producers that aren't going to be able to get the scale as someone with a large operation in that market is. What were some other things?
Also worth noting too, I was going to say the average annual revenue per cannabis store in the state is between $1 and $3 million. So clearly, go ahead.
That's a pretty fat spread for me. I would have liked to see it a little bit tighter, just so you can really extrapolate what this could mean when looking at one of the larger companies like a TerraSend or like a Skymint. 1 to 3 is it's a broad spread. As far as I'm concerned.
I know.
Granted, there are a ton of retail in Michigan. And one of the other data points that I thought was interesting was that 71% of the businesses are not rewarding employee stock options. Now, I don't really think that this should be common practice in the cannabis space, as it's something that we've seen in tech. And with a lot of these businesses, you can pick and choose who you want to offer stock options to in your business. And there's nothing better at building culture and a sustainable business than getting your employees to buy in from an overarching perspective. ESOPs work. ESOPs get sticky employees they also create culture, like I alluded to. I mean, I'd like to see a lot more of this in that space. Granted, all these businesses were between $5 and $100 million in revenue, so there's some optionality here with the assets that and the CFOs that were actually interviewed, but it was definitely some interesting points into a market that's throwing off about 270 million a month in revenue.
270 a month. Wow.
This report I put in the TDR top 7 cannabis developments, and that was the one thing that stood out as well. That over 50% of these companies need to raise money, and this is not an ideal environment. So there could be a sticky situation here, but at least in terms of the pubcos, Gage, Cannabis with TerrAscend, that business is still doing well. Correct, Andy? That's what we're hearing.
Yeah. And I mean, via Ziad and Jason at Investor Day, I mean, they're looking to expand their portfolio, their portfolio of retail within the state of Michigan. They have a calculus. Yeah, they have a calculus that, I mean, adding incremental doors brings on X amount of incremental revenue, and it's already profitable from the way that they have their mousetrap set up in Michigan. So I mean, a lot of these assets, over half need to raise money in the next 12 months. You've got to kind of think that some of them are going to get the door slammed on them and they're going to become acquisition targets in the near future.
That's actually good news for TerrAscend. We saw the same thing
on the dollar.
Saw the same thing with Maramid. Went into receivership and got some assets from the Ermont dispensary that went into receivership for pennies on the dollar. So I imagine TerrAscend would be a candidate. Some of these will be a candidate for TerrAscend to acquire too in receivership or outright buyout at very attractive prices.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is probably an inflection point too for the market where you start to see larger MSOs come in. It's always been a mystery as why there aren't really too many of them operating in the space in the state due to the unlimited license nature of the business of the state. But if we're starting to see margins stabilize, prices stabilize, the health of the industry kind of starts to mature, and there's going to be potential valuable M&A targets, I would start to bet that some of the MSOs are going to go in there and pick some stuff up sooner or later down the road.
Now you understand on Investor Day, as much as they were outlining all the states that they operate in, time and time again, you just heard the management say how excited they were for the state of Michigan. You can see why.
It's been a roller coaster, but I'm pretty confident for the operators that are in there, it's going to pay off.
Yeah, I think the ship's been righted there. And I think a lot of them within the TerrAscend company with that footprint that they have, big opportunity for them. Also, if you actually want to read the full details of Ben's top 7 developments for the week in cannabis, log on to thedalesreport.com and subscribe to our newsletter. It gives you a full in-depth approach on the week that was just had and what to look forward to in this upcoming week. This is the TDR Traded Black podcast on the Benzinga Television Network. Let's now move into the stock that starts and ends with everything. Advisor shares ETF MSOs, which after today is now testing a new low range. Big decline last week, Ben. What did you see today that grabbed your attention? Is it more of the same?
Yeah, it's basically more of the same. Coming into today, obviously you want to see if it stabilizes from the beginning, maybe gets a nice little bump after last week, after it declined 21.5%. I mean, that was a big move. And that was on top of already, steady declines over the previous 3 or 4 weeks and reversing completely the HHS rally. But that didn't happen. It just sort of melted off the low. And this was in the context of a strong broad market, which, SP finished up 1.7% or thereabouts today. So it wasn't a good start, and it got to about 492 and then it bounced. So it didn't quite test the low, but given that we've come in this far and given that it was weak, down 3.24% on a very strong macro day, I think there's a good chance we're going to test the 480 area, and hopefully that could be the basis of some sort of recovery. But at this point, tax loss selling is also a possibility. So everything's solidly in the negative. So you got to be careful about certain aspects. But maybe we'll get a bounce in early November with the earnings season coming up, the November 7th Ohio ballot. So there are positives, but it's be careful here.
Do you guys think we should see some pretty decent earnings coming out the next couple of weeks, don't you think? And if so, do you think this subsides and stops the bleeding a little bit? Is there anything to read into that?
I mean, it'd be nice. I mean, you saw Ascend Wellness. They had pre-announced that was positive. You saw some momentum in the stock. I think it was down about 4 4.5% today. But I mean, the fundamentals were rewarded. I think you're going to see some surprising earnings reports. I think that hopefully the earnings reports gets the growth narrative back into the story, and some of these stocks start to pop. I don't think they're going to be dead money forever.
I think a lot of retail investors are looking at who have got into cash after September are probably looking at this very, very closely. But to your point, Ben, you're still walking and proceeding with caution.
I mean, I would tread. I think Ben couldn't be more right. I would tread lightly. I mean, you've got the rebalancing of the MJ ETF, of what couple of the other ETFs that are passively managed versus actively managed, and then you've got tax loss selling. I mean, we could hit a few bombs here in the month of November. I would be very, 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 very cautious.
That's the thing. Tax loss selling season is around the corner.
But then you could argue, I mean, we're kind of round tripping it to where we are before HHS. So might not be a lot of losses here if people were actually holding bags and didn't sell.
Yeah, if you're a near-term person, if you've been holding from the beginning of the year, I mean, the ETF was only about 7 per. It was at around 7. So the loss isn't actually all that bad, but there's some carry back losses from going back before 2022 and things like that. Tax loss selling is not just the year thing; it could also carry back a little bit as well. So we'll see what happens. But right now we went from solidly tax loss selling is probably not in the equation to now where it currently stands is in the equation. So hopefully we can get to a level where you can eliminate that variable from the price action.
Yeah. This is the TDR Trade of Black podcast on the Benzinga Television Network. I'm your host, Shad Dales, with Benjamin A. Smith and Anthony Verrills. We take a comprehensive look at the cannabis, psychedelic, and crypto industries, giving you in-depth latest news and what to expect in later this week. As we just finished talking about cannabis, I want to switch now to psychedelics, and more notably, psilocybin's latest schedule status, where today a federal appeals court directed the U.S. DEA to give a detailed explanation for keeping psilocybin on the list of the most restricted substances. This is interesting, Anthony, on how the DEA will respond to this.
Yes, I mean, this is very interesting. It's an appeal for a previous suit that was filed to reschedule psilocybin from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. It was mandated by the courts to let the appeal go through. Obviously, Schedule 1 to Schedule 2 implies that there is therapeutic, medically proven benefits from the substance, which unfortunately right now with psilocybin, as a lot of us do know, or a lot of us have seen, I mean, you could argue that there are anecdotal medical benefits to psilocybin. That doesn't cut it, unfortunately, with the DEA and the FDA. But from a positive light, there are trials that are underway in regards to psilocybin. We could have medical proof of the efficacy of psilocybin as a therapeutic substance here shortly. This lawsuit is also, and this appeal is also going to help us determine the sentiment for psilocybin within the FDA and the DEA. So this is something that I'm going to be watching very closely. This could bode well for the biotech companies that are working on psilocybin and really set the tone for the pace at which psilocybin can be commercialized. And just the general conversation around re and descheduling. So I'll be watching this closely.
I don't think people can overlook this. This would be a huge move for the industry to go from a Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. And worth noting, fentanyl, if I'm correct, is a Schedule 2 drug right now, which is crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, you gotta follow the language when the language is there. I mean, fentanyl does have a medical benefit. That's it. That's the loophole. That's why it's Schedule 2.
Time will change things. Don't you agree, Ben?
Well, if you look at what happened with MDMA assisted therapy when they got the phase 3 data, and then it has proven late stage efficacy in a clinical trial, then they're going to apply for that rescheduling for that drug in that application. So it could also come through the phase process, the phase trial process. But this is a really good lawsuit to see as well. Definitely helps any sort of pressure that helps in the court system or through the clinical trial, wherever it comes from, is definitely going to be a benefit. So I'll be looking forward to see what comes of this.
What are we looking at as far, no one really knows timeline wise as to when that response would be, or is it
this appeal?
Yeah,
no.
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 Is it that whole 90?
No, this doesn't. This
Yeah.
So that whole 90-day thing, which was alleged, and I saw it was debunked a lot of places, was that the DEA has to respond to an HHS recommendation in up to 90 days. This is an appeal. This is going to go through the courts. This is going to
Yeah.
take its sweet ass time.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even begin to hypothesize what the time frame around this is going to look like.
Yeah.
But we still have some time. We still have some time before the phase 3 trials become a success. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's there's time here. Compass won't be done until 2027. Cybin's just getting into phase 3 if they have positive results. So there's time before there's real world applications that and through the FDA process before hopefully the nexus of these two to kind of come together.
There will come a day where people will say, why are you guys following this space? I believe that because it will change and it will take time like any other emerging industry. But this is a big step if it got moved from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 2 in combination with the FDA possibly legalizing MDMA at some point next year. People will just buy into it more and more. Okay, let's now focus on a political angle where Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, somebody needs to sit him down and give him a glass of water, but he's taking aim at a cannabis initiative ahead of Ohio's November 7th legislation vote. Ben, what exactly is this initiative, and should the people of Ohio be concerned at all with this adult use initiative ballot or vote, I should say, passing on November 7th?
I think you should be slightly concerned. I mean, it isn't an overwhelming majority. And for viewers who don't know, it's issue 2 that goes on the Ohio ballot. So that is the adult use recommendation to recreationalize cannabis that goes to voters in the state. And it has about a 57% approval, according to the latest polls going in. And Mike, Governor DeWine doesn't like this, and he's sort of stating this that his opposition, and he's leading the push to persuade Ohioans to say no. And he's not the only politician in the state. There are a lot of people who are actually against this measure, and he's one of them. And he's for he's against the abortion part as well. So he's lending a skeptic hand to this. Maybe he's trying to influence sentiment for the upcoming vote. We have the pre-vote already happening right now for early voting already happening, but he's definitely not for it, and maybe he's trying to influence in other ways. And I don't know, maybe he'll try to stand in the way somehow, and hopefully if it doesn't pass.
If he's not for it, and 57% of the state are for it, he's really putting his neck out there.
Yeah. Do you think there's concerns? Like, Ohio's been one of the most hard hit, devastated states in the country to have been decimated by the whole Oxycontin epidemic. And I know cannabis is so far removed from Oxycontin, but do you think that could have something to play in it, knowing that there's just been abuse and addiction that's spread like wildfire within that state as to why he's, oh, here we go, just another narcotic that's people want?
So, number one, cannabis is not a narcotic. I mean, number 2, sure, but I mean, people have used cannabis to get off of opioids, to get off of opioid addiction, and people have used it to get off of addiction from those kind of substances in general. I don't know if I see the correlation between the two, but I mean, I can definitely understand where you're coming from.
Maybe these politicians that lack.
Oh, no. I understand where you're coming from. They just dealt with an opioid epidemic, and now they don't want a bunch of people walking around Main Street all high all day. That's not going to happen. It's been proven that doesn't happen.
He should be more for it, because a lot of people, like Anthony said, a lot of people use cannabis to actually wean off opioids. So this should be his friend. But the fact that he's like saying things like he doesn't think the little bit of money that comes into legalization is worth the damage, quote unquote, to the people of Ohio. It's just that sort of inflammatory language that just, coming from the governor, right? Not just some sort of lobbyist or anything like Sam lobbyist. I just don't understand where we are today and people saying those kind of things.
But it's where these guys grew up. I mean, it's reefer madness. Like, it's the war on drugs. Like, these are the guys that are fully ingrained in that culture. These are the guys that are behind this, and these are the guys that are going to take it to the grave to make sure that this stuff gets impeded all the way. Like, these happen to be the good old boys that are in government right now. There's some of them that have changed their tune. There's others that aren't, and they could also be in bed with people that don't want cannabis to come full circle.
Yeah.
So I mean, it sucks, but it's not very surprising.
Clearly designed to sway sentiment.
Correct.
Clearly designed to sway sentiment and try to get people to not vote for it when the full vote comes up on the 7th.
Like how you outlined that cannabis is not a narcotic too.
It's not.
Technically it is, but it shouldn't be.
Technically, yeah.
Agreed. Okay, that concludes our first segment, which is Into the Wire, highlighting all the biggest headlines here on the TDR Trade of Black podcast on the Bezega TV network. Thanks for joining. If you just logged on, I'm your host, Shad Dales, along with lead financial writer Benjamin A. Smith and millennial entrepreneur Anthony Verrill, as we just wrapped up some key takeaways and headlines pertaining to cannabis and psychedelics. It's now switched into our Daily Movers segment. Once again, we begin with cannabis. And Anthony, a company that's getting rocked right now, Curaleaf. Wow.
So I don't understand. Well, I do understand, but I don't understand. And I don't want to get back to the whole cabal of, hey, there's a bunch of shorters out there. If there are a bunch of shorters that have been piling on Curaleaf, this is probably their last ditch effort to get it down as much as possible before it uplists to the TSX and the funny business on the CSE goes away. I don't know any other justification for this. It's now trading at about a $1.8 billion market cap. It's well off of its highs. It's now, as you can see by that chart, round tripped the HHS recommendation momentum that it had. And I honestly don't know where it goes from here. But I will be watching it and we'll be looking for an entry point in it. Because, I mean, if we do get a headline and this sector does go to the upside, I can guarantee you that Curaleaf will be a beneficiary of that. And they've got the European exposure.
And as well, if they knock it out when it comes to earnings next week, even on the short term, like I would not want to be shorting this stock right now.
I'm honestly, cannabis stocks haven't traded on earnings for a while. So, I mean, I'm very, very intrigued to see what happens next week and the week after with these earnings reports, especially if they come in with 10 to 15% beefier top lines and you see some margin expansion. And some of them are shoring up their balance sheets. I mean, it's going to be interesting.
Think about this. We get no HHS announcement at the end of August, early September. History has shown earnings has done nothing. That announcement's changed everything. And you start to put on your napkin math as to say, like, what would happen if 280E were to go away? And if they have big numbers, you can understand why people are watching this. In addition to you are watching this closely.
Yeah.
All right, next up, Ben, interesting one here. The Cannabis Company Holdings, otherwise trades on the CBST, on CBOE, and on the OTC under the ticker symbol CBSTF. Down significantly off the open today, but appeared to bounce back. What's up with this company in the stock?
Yeah, this is as the whole market's crashed. This has been sort of the poster boy of the sort of decline, at least in the last week. It was down over 50% last week, from 103 to a close of 50 on the CBOE. So we're talking over 50%. And I was actually looking at it. I did not do anything. It wasn't actionable for me. I waited. I'm not a knife catcher, but the RSI levels on like short term, which is the relative strength index on short term charts, like the 5-minute chart, was getting down into 6 and 7 territory. And that's very rare. Anytime you get anything RSI under 10 is very, very unique. And it might happen in a bearish stock like once every 2 or 3 years. Daily levels were close to 10, a little bit above that. So I was looking at it. Ultimately, I didn't do anything, but it just, unbelievable decline. And again, there's no real fundamental reason for it. Their earnings come out November 14th. They are exposed to the Ohio ballot, and which looks positive at this point. So it just, I think I would characterize it as a buyer strike. I don't know if get into the whole short-term driving the market.
That there had to have been some sort of fund that got blown up or some sort of seller that was in the market that just pounded it down on the open this morning. I mean, it was down 25% on like 2.2 million shares traded. And then I was laughing with Shad before our call this morning. And I'm like, watch, this thing's going to wind up turning green by the end of the day. It went from 25, ticked to 12, and then round tripped it all the way up. I think it was up as much as 7% going into the close, and then wound up 4%. On the day. But I was looking at my head, just scratching it, looking at the valuation and how it's trading at about 1x quarterly top line revenue.
Yeah.
And think about this too. Like, there were sophisticated investors, accredited investors who purchased equity in this in this company about a month ago now for $1.52 a share, or was it $1.53? I can't remember, but
$1.53. You're correct.
$1.53 like 4 weeks ago, or 5 weeks ago. So that's what investors at that time were willing to pay for this company. It was down over 2/3 from that point. So that's how extreme things have gone, right? And there hasn't been any material news to really change the narrative at all. It just, I can't explain.
If anything, they've gotten good news. In that time frame, New York opened up the applications for them to flip their dispensaries from medical to rec. So, I mean, if anything, they've got a growth catalyst in the chamber, and the stock's down 70% from the HHS announcement.
Well, you bring up an interesting point. If a fund had to blow out, like, we don't obviously know if that's the case or not. You can't really speculate, but I just don't understand why the stock has just been hit so hard last week or so, because like you said, like, they raised money, got rid of a lot of their debt, and that price in comparison to where it's sitting at today, what was it again? You said 153.
153.
Wow.
It was down to 36.5 cents. We're talking like 75% from the raise price.
Watch this company closely, that's for sure. Full disclosure, they are a client of ours. I have a position in the company, so I just want to be fully disclosed or transparent with that with our audience.
You bought in Friday, right, Chad?
Yeah. All right, let's now switch to actually a group of stocks. You mentioned last week, Ben, Atai Life Sciences, Compass Pathways, all testing all-time lows. They bounced back. So did Numinous a little bit today, but Numinous, another stock, last couple weeks, this thing has been hit hard.
Yeah. And the big thing that I've noticed off the bounce and is the fact, well, I mean, it isn't too notable that they bounced 10% off their all-time lows, given how much they've gone down. That's really not news, but it's the fact that this weekend news came out that Goldman, a quote from Goldman Sachs, that said, in their opinion, that the Fed is done, and they expect Fed officials to appear to have signaled that they are not going to hike in November. And they interpret this as being that hikes could be done overall. And the reason why that's important is in biotech stocks are heavily influenced by the direction of interest rates, since most of the sector companies project revenues in the future. So these in the discounted cash flow model, these does not favor stocks that don't produce revenue and earnings right now. So they get hit off, rising rate environment, and the fact that maybe this has come to an end could signal, maybe it was a relief to traders to say, hey, maybe I'm going to, take a position here and start bottom picking.
It's interesting. So you
just
believe
a theory,
that?
I don't know.
It's funny to see them all move. It's funny to see them all move on the same day. I mean, Atai, Compass, and Numinous all moved on the same day. So I mean, it's obviously some sort of interest within the sector, but I mean, I'm kind of in agreement with Ben from a macro theme. Like, if rates drop or if rates are not going up at all, I mean, it does bode well for biotech as a whole.
Yeah,
it's been a huge headwind. This rate environment's been a massive headwind.
I mean, so I've got about 75 names on my watch list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The top 5 are psychedelic stocks. Atai, Compass, Numinous, GHRS, and MindMed. They're all up over 4.5%.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it is interesting to.
And you can say that macro is up, but I mean, look at cannabis stocks. MSOs finished down 3.2%. So risk assets in like sort of the same sort of tier, although they're different. Were down. So it wasn't like the market lifted all boats. So whether it's coincidence or not, I'm not sure, but there's definitely some bottom picking going on today.
Yeah.
Jushi actually tapped 40 cents today too. That was down
40%.
Yeah.
Wow, that was like 110, 120 3 weeks ago.
Jushi. Everything's round trip the HHS announcement except for Air. Air's got about another 30% to go, 35% to go. If it round trips. And one of the good things to see today was Maramed. Maramed was actually in the green. It was up 5.5%. Granted, it was on super light volume of only 118,000 shares traded, but they had a couple of consecutive red days last week. That just had me scratching my head as to what's going on.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they're a healthy company. Obviously, they're a client as well, but they are one of the better companies in the space from a balance sheet perspective.
And none of these executives care about this day-to-day price action.
They shouldn't. If you have an executive, if there's an executive that does care about the day-to-day stock price movements, to me, that's a red flag.
Yeah, good point.
And all the companies that we talk to, I mean, we're dealing with seasoned executives.
Yeah.
They don't care about the price today. They care about the price 5 years from now.
Full disclosure as well, MaryMed is a client of ours. Great guys, that's for sure. A couple of comments I want to see. Cannabis also part of the Sunstream portfolio.
Yeah, they lended money. Sunstream lended money to the Cannabis.
Gotcha. Can we get an offhanded comment about the Canadian government holding up the closing between SNDL and Nova? I don't know.
I unfortunately don't know a single thing about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw the headline too. I am not too in tune with what's going on there, but they extended the deadline, I think, to the acquisition of Nova. So I'm not sure if that's a government thing. I don't know why they would hold.
Do you guys have antitrust up there, as far as M&A goes?
What do you mean antitrust?
The government, in the States, the government will evaluate any M&A activity with bigger businesses to make sure that there's no monopolies forming.
Oh, right. Well, there shouldn't be. There's how many LPs, Shad? Like 550 in Canada. So there's definitely they're not rare.
Is there 550?
I'm not sure. I think it's somewhere around that. When legalization happened, it was around 320, 350, and I think it only went up from there. So they're
all going back to vegetable farming.
Yeah, there's no monopoly here on cannabis anywhere, really.
All right. All right, gents, that wraps up the TDR Traded Black podcast here, the Benzinga Television Network. Good, interesting Monday Night Football game tonight. Mitch, producer, you got any Monday Night Football music for us as we head on out of here? Probably not. Anyways, recap of today's show. Let's look at it. State of Michigan reported that the average store is now producing between 1 and 3 million in revenue annually. Advisory shares ETF is testing all-time lows as the meltdown of the industry continues. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine doesn't think the little bit of money that the state of Ohio will generate when it comes to adult use is worth the damage to the people of Ohio. And finally, a federal court's appeal has asked for a detailed explanation from the DEA as to why psilocybin needs to be kept on the list of the most restricted substances.
I think Mike DeWine's drinking a little bit too much of the wine. Like that guy, I don't know what that guy.
We got to get Semi-Evolved Mammal from Twitter over to Mike DeWine's office. He'll change his tune real fast.
He's the best. He's the best terrier on Twitter. He goes after. He doesn't care who it is. He goes after everybody. So
I would pay to see how many times he called Chuck Schumer's office and the grassroots effort that he literally brought from Twitter to call Chuck Schumer's office. I would bet you that he did make a difference in the amount of chatter that was going to those politicians' phone lines.
How old is he?
No idea.
Easily,
don't even know if it's a he. It could easily be a she.
No comment. Mike DeWine. Let me see. Age, Ohio.
I'm guessing he's in his 60s.
76 years old.
Oh, so he's really a war on drugs OG.
Is he 76 years old?
Yeah. There we go. I would actually prefer the Imperial March as our sign-off music moving forward, but we'll do that next episode.
That'll wrap things up for today. What do you guys think? A little disappointed on how things performed here today. Well, let's see how things perform the rest of the week. Is there any questions, any comments you want to provide? What do you think? How's the week going to progress? We'd love to hear from you. Love to always have some dialogue and some feedback. If there's anybody, anyone, any podcast that you want us to reach out and interview, let us know, and we'll reach out to our network and we will make it happen. I'm Shad Dales, host of the TDR Traded Black podcast. That is Benjamin A. Smith, along with Anthony Verrill. Gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll be back here at 4:10 every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, the TDR Traded Black podcast here on the Benzinga Television Network. Enjoy the rest of your day. Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we